Welcome to Cars on Call. I'm automotive journalist Steve Schutz, and I'm joined, of course, by trauma surgeon Stephan Moran. We're the only podcast that has a trauma surgeon that talks about trauma surgeon perspectives on safety, and that's really cool. Stephan, how are you?
I'm doing great. It finally quit raining. We've had like 2 weeks of solid rain, and the sun came out yesterday, and we're enjoying the lake. And it's going to be hotter than hell this week, but it'll be a good time.
Yeah. Well, we are kind of chilly here. It was 50 degrees this morning. It's warmed up
Oh,
to like 60, so it's weird. It's been cold, but Boise can be cold sometimes. We got Adams is unavailable today, but we've got some. I want to tell a personal story that involved a car dealership, not in my town, but the next town over. It's a hell of a story. I was talking to a friend of mine that I grew up with, and it was shocking to kind of talk about this because we lived. I'm from a town called St. James on Long Island. It's about halfway out on the island, right across from Connecticut, basically across from Bridgeport, Connecticut, across the Sound. And there were two scandals that happened when I was a kid that were huge national news. And I think back on it, they both happened right where I grew up. One was in Port Jefferson, which is that's the story I'm going to talk about today. Port Jeff was basically the next town over. And then the other scandal happened at a hospital in my town. It was Smithtown. And I'll get into that. We'll talk about the scandals, and also my personal connection to them. Of course, Stefan, you're going to talk about automotive safety from your trauma surgeon perspective. I drove an interesting car, Subaru Crosstrek, and then the Mustang GTD, Stefan. Your site to talk about that, right?
Yeah, looking forward to talking about that one.
All right. So the scandal, and this is a gigantic scandal, and it made national news, and it's still unbelievable to me that this happened. I'll tell you the second scandal, the hospital scandal. This would have been in the 70s. There was a doctor, a surgeon who was chief of staff at this hospital, colluded with an administrator, and they stole millions of dollars, embezzled it from the hospital, and they finally got busted, and both of them did a little bit of jail time. They had to try to pay some restitution, but it was shocking to me at the time that these two guys would steal so much money from a hospital. And the other scandal was almost comical. Stealing from a hospital is not funny, but this is almost funny because it was stealing from GMAC. And this was something called McNamara Buick GMC. And this was in Port Jefferson. My personal connection is not my personal connection. This, I think, is HIPAA okay because the guy died. But my mom, who was an obstetrician, delivered all of his children. He was Catholic. I think he had six children. And so she knew the wife, who she said was very nice. And the husband was apparently a nice guy too. And he was a prominent donor to the local Catholic Church. He was their biggest donor. And he donated many, many millions of dollars. And as far as I know, the Catholic Church did not have to give any of the money back, even though it was certainly stolen. But here's the story, Stefan. Again, he owned a Buick GMC dealership in a small town, and it was, whatever. It's a dealership just like you'd have at any town. But he set up this fraud. It's a Ponzi scheme, and it was genius. Okay, you remember conversion vans, Stefan?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you take a van and you put like a table in it, and you can
Some
sleep in it.
soft
And
velour captain seats in the back, and you
yeah,
cruise down the interstate and luxury in the back. Absolutely.
yeah. So he created a company called K Industries, located in Indiana, and K Industries made conversion vans that he would sell through his dealership. Now, in order to make it look good, because anyone's going to know that there's not that many conversion van customers in Port Jefferson, Long Island, he told GMAC, who was paying for the loans on all of these conversion vans, he said, "Hey, I'm going to sell them to a third party in Cyprus, and these are all going to be sold abroad." So amazingly, over 11 years from
So they're
1980.
going to sell these giant American conversion vans to the country of Cyprus?
So you're applying common sense, and it is shocking to me. And again, as the
That,
stories unfold, you
that
realize,
Yeah, right there already, there's a big disconnect. I mean, because if you ever been over there, you can't even, these won't even fit on the road over there.
See what I'm saying? This is so stupid. It's amazing that he got away with it for 11 years. And I think even he knew that because
11 years.
when he was arrested, he said, "What took you so long?" So,
Oh my gosh.
so during these 11 years, he financed $6 billion worth of loans through GMAC for 200 and small dealership, small town Long Island. 248,000 vans that did not exist. In 1990, he quote unquote sold 53% of all the conversion vans sold in America that year. Hello? Small, small
Pound.
dealership on Long Island. And when he was caught, he just went too far. December 1991, his company, K Industries, sold more conversion vans than there were conversion vans sold that month. Like 107% or whatever of all the conversion vans sold that month were through his dealership. So it was absolutely incredible, Stefan. And this happened and happened and happened. And it was just absolutely amazing. Finally, in 1991, because of that big month, it was so huge that even GMAC was like, wait a second, this is, like you said, Stefan, starting not to make sense.
That
So they did an audit and they found out that these vans did not actually exist, which I think is really funny. He was caught. Why, Stefan? Because he had vans with no VINs, no vehicle
so
identification numbers.
I mean, so this is GMAC is financing, giving him money for supposedly vans that GM is building,
Yes.
and then he's selling the conversion van.
Frequently during this 11-year period, he would get calls from someone at GM or GMAC, and they'd say, hey, there's a problem. Very famously, he got a call from GMAC, and a guy said, hey, this the computer is spitting out all the VINs we're putting because he would make up the numbers. And he would again when they finally searched, they did an audit. Every van had a VIN, but the VINs didn't exist. They were completely fictitious. So what happened was GMAC earlier in the process found out like, hey, this doesn't make any sense. The computer's saying these VINs don't exist. So he said to the guy, well, what's the best way to fix this? And the guy said, well, we could just override the computer. He goes, all right, let's do that.
Oh my
So there was a safeguard in place, and he just talked to the guy and said, hey, just override. The guy said, I can override it. And he said, yeah, do that. He did that multiple times during the 11
That's
years.
why car salesman through and through.
Yeah. So it was incredible. He what he would do is he would pay GMAC back every single month, but he was paying them back.
The interest.
No, his volumes increased month by month. So he would get
Ah,
more loans. He was paying the loans back
that
with
with
the new
loans.
loans. He paid old loans back every month with new loans, but because the volumes were going up, he was getting bigger loans every month. He ended up at the end, there were $436 million. That's probably what he stole, although he may have stolen more than that. But that's the final that they could not account for. And of course, he had it. His net worth was huge. He was arrested in April 1992. He pled guilty in September 1992. No prison time. And he was able to keep his houses, and he had an auto parts company that was successful. So he paid restitution, but not all the restitution. Absolutely incredible story, Stefan. And just as the aftermath of this, which is kind of interesting, both the president and CFO of GMAC were immediately fired.
Oh, yes.
Like,
I
yeah,
should hope so.
of course, there were many people in GMAC that were in his area. They were all fired, and it turns out they never did any. They were all fired, of course. They didn't do any prison time or anything like that, but they were bribed with free service at his dealership and incredibly deep discounts on cars. So they'd buy cars from him for like nothing. And in exchange for that, they of course looked at him as a good guy, and they didn't tell the higher ups like, "Hey, there's probably something wrong here." Some the Probably the reason he didn't. This is all murky, but probably the reason he didn't do in jail time was there were local officials that he bribed for some
Hmm.
things, and they were charged with bribery. So this was an amazing story of
You know,
greed.
bribery in New York and Long Island? No, no. I can't believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, but somebody had to be helping him cook the books at the dealership. I mean, there's just no. I mean, somebody had to say, "Hey, we just ordered 600 conversion vans. When are they showing up?" But I guess he just somehow had
Well,
everybody.
he had this is first of all, he had a legitimate company called K Industries in Indiana that
Okay.
he set up, but it was an office that had no furniture and it had a single phone line, and then that phone would automatically forward all calls to a desk in his office in Port Jefferson, Long Island. So if GM had ever bothered, you'd think at some point they'd say this K Industries is making, what, 53% of all conversion vans sold in the country, and at one point more conversion vans than there were conversion vans. You'd think at some point they would go to Indiana and check it out, and they would expect to see a building with a parking lot and maybe 1,000 conversion vans.
I mean, they need to make this into a movie or at least a documentary.
I think it'd be a great movie.
I guess.
He had a shell company, so his conversion van numbers and all of that was completely sequestered from the rest of the dealership. So all the Buicks and GMCs that he sold, those went through the dealership. That was all the clean books. Again,
Ah,
it's kind of like Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff had an actual investment company, and they did investments, but it was very small. And that was kind of the fig leaf to cover up this incredible fraud he had. Well, it's the same thing here. You had a legitimate dealerships doing service, selling cars, all of it's above board, but there's this shell company that operates out of the dealership, outside of the dealership, that works on the left hand with K Industries and the right hand with the country of Cyprus selling all these cars. And again, Stefan, you're right. Why not some common sense where someone says, hey, wait a minute, American conversion vans are not going to fly in Greece or wherever the hell you're going to sell them.
even to me, it even speaks more to our justice system. Think about it. This guy swindled $463 million, and how much jail time did he do?
Zero point
Zero.
zero days, Stefan.
So why not? I mean, so if
Good thing he
400,
didn't. Good thing he wasn't. He didn't. Good thing he didn't possess an ounce of marijuana.
yeah. I mean, yeah, so why not? Why not swindle them? If you think about it, the odds that you're not going to go to jail for a white collar crime, why not? Why not go for it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And in today's age, you just get pardoned, you know. If you were doing jail time as swindler, they'd think, you get pardoned because no, you were smart enough to go against the system. Jeez, that's just what
Well,
a
there you go,
story.
Stefan.
All right. Well,
We all
I
have our
actually,
brushes with greatness. That was my brush with crime.
well, you said something about on the agenda about McNamara. So I looked up McNamara's swindle, and you know what Chat GPT pulls up is Robert McNamara.
Right.
Yeah, former President of Ford and Secretary of Defense. And so I pulled that up. That's why I got him, but I was not expecting this story. This is even way better. I was like, this is not that. This is the McNamara swindle. I mean, the original, they talk about vaporware. This really should be like McNamara ware or something. Everything that's total smoke and should be named after this guy, not vaporware. I mean, this is unbelievable. What a great
11
story.
years, he sells
100.
248,000 vans that don't exist, and no one noticed.
Well, it says a lot about GMAC and GM too.
Yes, of course, they have all kinds of safeguards. It says another thing, and that is that we have these safeguards, but ultimately they're all made by humans, and they can be overridden or gotten around because humans are ingenious and humans are stupid, and that combination means you can have. It's the same reason why you have employees that can embezzle money, and
Right.
it just shows, it shows reality. So, all right, what do you have for safety?
All right, so you, I had a couple of topics, and you sent me one that I think is very interesting, worthwhile talking. This is kind of like a public service announcement, and we just got back from Tuscany, and we rented e-bikes. Now, the e-bike we rented was basically a mountain bike with a boost assist electric motor on it. And I've heard a lot about e-bikes. Of course, now I'm retired, I haven't been in the ER, but you brought up like, well, what are the statistics on these e-bikes? Well, let's first of all
Well,
define.
before you say that, I think I'm not alone.
Oh yeah,
And if it depends on where you are, but in Boise,
right.
we have a green belt, which is a walkway that goes along the river. It goes for many miles. And what I see all the time is young kids on these e-bikes. Then I was in Charleston, just driving around neighborhoods with friends, and you see kids on e-bikes going so fast. I'm like, I got to ask Stefan about this.
I've got a big shop, and every other week or so I have a shop social where I invite all the local guys in the neighborhood, and we just sit around and tell tall tales, lies, and maybe a little drinking involved. But Don is an older guy, and he's recovering from chemotherapy, but he's got a place down at the beach. And he says he's scared to death to walk down to the beach because you get all these tourists that are riding e-bikes, and he's almost been hit multiple times by somebody on an e-bike.
Mm,
So the Consumer Product Safety Act defines an e-bike. So it is supposed to be a low-speed electric bicycle. Two or three wheels. You must have fully operable pedals for it to be called an e-bike. Max horsepower is 1 horsepower, 750 watts. And the max speed that the power can assist you at is supposed to be 20 miles an hour. So if you don't have fully operable pedals, it's not an e-bike, it's a motorcycle. If you've got more than 1 horsepower, it's not a bicycle, it's an electric motorcycle. And if you can go 20 miles an hour faster with the motor alone, that's a motorcycle.
wow.
Now, a couple reasons that makes a big difference is if it is a motorcycle, then it requires DMV registration. You've got to have insurance for it. And then the motorcycle regulations fall in line with that, meaning you have to have a motorcycle license. You've got to have DOT compliant equipment, which is lights, mirrors, brake lights, all that kind of stuff. But clearly, what we've seen and you've seen, and I've heard it on Spike's car radio, Spike talking about his son and their bicycles. Kids are jacking these things up. They're changing the software, and they're basically turning what started out as an e-bike. Now they're clearly really more like motorcycles with pedals, but they really go as fast as a motorcycle and they should be qualified as motorcycles. And then, so now you get into this zone where you've got kids on e-bikes that are more like motorcycles and they're not wearing helmets. These bikes are heavy. They're getting into situations because they don't have their license. They don't know the rules of the road and they're getting injured. Now, some states actually classify e-bikes into one, two, and three. I'm not going to go into all the details. But the one of the bottom line is if you have a e-bike that is really a motorcycle with horsepower, you're not allowed on in bicycle path and the bicycle paths. You're not allowed on the sidewalks. And that's where you get the interaction between the borderline gray motorcycle being used in a way that a bicycle is. So now you've got pedestrians that think it's just a bicycle. They're not expecting this thing to go as fast, and then the people riding them get injured. All right, well, let's look at. So now we talked about how you're damn right these things are dangerous. Well, so how dangerous are they? How do we prove that they're dangerous? Well, the easy way is to go back. Clearly, if they're dangerous, people are crashing them, right? Well, if you look at e-bike ER visits from e-bike injuries, there were approximately 751 in 2017. Guess how much you think that went up over a 5 year period, the 2022? Just pick a number. 5x,
Uh,
10x, 20x, 30x, 50x.
I'm gonna say 5X.
30 times, dude. 30
You gotta be
times.
kidding me.
It
Oh
went
my
from
God.
751 injuries in 2017 to 23,500 in 2022.
Wow.
I mean, think about that. And then in 2022, they went up 20% on their own.
That's shocking.
Yeah, half of all they call these micro mobility injuries. Half of the injuries from 2017 to 2022 occurred in 2022 alone. Okay. There were 104 e-bike fatalities from 2018 to 22.
Mm.
From 2018, there were six. 2022, there were 42 deaths. Um,
Wow.
People aren't wearing helmets on these e-bikes. You're right. You said 50x, so
I said
traumatic.
5X.
I'm so
I said
sorry,
5X.
5x, 5x.
Yeah.
Traumatic head injuries increased 50 fold, 50 times.
Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a big deal. I mean, this is a super big deal if you think about the injury rates here going on. I'm not even going to get into the orthopedic injuries. Um, so if you've got your kids, grandkids, or whatever, and somebody comes over your house and says, "Hey, can I borrow your e-bike?" Well, we talked a while back about a lawsuit that occurred when a young girl neighbor got on the back of an e-bike. She crashed, had a fatal injury, and it was a big lawsuit. So I don't know where homeowners insurance falls to these e-bikes, but if you've got your kids riding an e-bike, make sure they're in a helmet. And if they're jacking up their e-bike, you need to make sure that they're in a motorcycle helmet. And you treat this thing as a motorcycle. They're not going to want it because it's goofy and all that, but unfortunately these days, we survived childhood without bicycle helmets. Fortunately now most every kid's wearing helmets. Adults are wearing helmets. But if you're wearing a bicycle helmet, that's for crashing a bicycle. Okay. That's not crashing an e-bike at a higher velocity. So,
Is there any information about how many pedestrians are struck and injured or killed by these e-bikes? Because again, they fly by me on the green belt, and
yeah.
it's unbelievable. They come very close. They're talking, and again, especially with the kids, they're going more than 20 miles an hour. And if they were to run into me, I would certainly be injured.
Yeah, because you think about the weight of those bicycles. I mean, they're heavy. So let's see here. So if you look at pedestrian injuries from e-bikes, I just pulled this up. They went up 11-fold to 10x times, so a little over about 11 times higher. And their higher speeds, more severe injuries as you can imagine as a pedestrian. If you're getting hit by a bicycle that weighs 25, 30 pounds versus a regular bike, and you've got the passenger on top of that, you're going to have much higher injury rates. So, yeah, definitely it's pedestrian injuries are up 11 times, and the person riding the bike are up. And I can understand being down at the beach. I haven't been down there in a while. We rode our e-bikes in Tuscany. We were on roads with motor vehicles and other cyclists. And then we did a lot of dirt roads. We don't live in the city anymore, so I don't have personal experience seeing kids zipping around, but I hear about it. And I imagine, especially out west, California, the west where you're at, I'm sure there's way more e-bikes than we have, especially in the college scene.
The place I've seen the most, especially with kids, Charleston for sure, a resort town, but my son lives in Newport Beach in Orange County, California, and that's where I see tons and tons of kids on e-bikes, teenagers, everyone's on e-bikes. It's just amazing to see. I thought it would be more scooters, but I think they've switched over to e-bikes because they're faster.
Yeah. Yep, they're very fast.
All right. Well, this is obviously, Stefan, this is one of those problems we're going to see more of, not less of. So
Yes.
we'll have to monitor. I want to talk quickly about, I had an experience driving a Crosstrek, and that's a Subaru. The Subaru Outback is Subaru's great at marketing, and they've been really smart. And they took advantage of the SUV craze, not by building an SUV, although now they have an SUV, but with the Outback, they took a legacy station wagon, which is kind of a boring station wagon, and they butched it up and they lifted it, gave it like knobby tires, and then put like a rack on the roof, a roof rack on, and then some plastic cladding, and they called it the Outback, and all of a sudden it took off. And the same thing with the Impreza. The Impreza is just a little Subaru hatchback. I don't even know if they make the Impreza hatchback anymore. They certainly make the sedan. But they took the Impreza hatchback and then they did the same thing. They pushed it up, put some bigger wheels, they lifted it, put a roof rack on, and all of a sudden it's the Crosstrek. And they charge a lot more money for the Outback and the Crosstrek than they do for the other models. And they're more popular. It's more profitable for Subaru. And these have become hugely popular. Well, anyway, my mother-in-law was with us for 3 months, and she left her car here, and it's a base Crosstrek. And oh my gosh, it was amazing. It this is Stefan. Sometimes, and this is my point, driving a base cheap car is actually pretty nice. It has a couple things which are notable. One is manual seats. Well, you think, oh no, I like, electric seats and you can save it and everything like that. Well, if you're the only person driving the car, once you set the seats, they're fine. Manual seats are fine. I actually liked it. You can get pretty fine sense or movements and get it exactly where we want it. And then of course it's set it and forget it. And as long as I'm the only one driving it, which I have been, it's great. So that's nice. The second thing I love, and Stefan, I know you're going to comment on this. The HVAC is completely manual. So you have dials for fan speed. Yes. You have a button for AC. Yes. You have another dial that tells you where the vents are supposed to spit out the air. And then you've got a red to blue dial too. You don't dial the temperature in. You just dial exactly. To me, it's like a manual thermostat at home. It's great. You just set your temperature and you're done. With this thing, it's not fancy. It doesn't turn it down when you're away or anything like that. With these HVAC controls, Stefan, you just set it where it's like you get the temperature kind of dialed in. It's not a temperature, but you get hot versus cold. And I like to have the air flowing on me, and I set the fan speed. It's so simple.
Yeah, I'm with you on the auto climate control. The one thing I do like is the dual sync where you can have passenger driver temperature. I do like that feature, but I would rather have the button like you have that's got the defrost button, the defrost foot button, the in your face
Yes.
only button. I do like those buttons a lot, and I do like the temperature dial, but I do really like to be able to just set the temperature for his and her temperature. The dual is nice, but yeah, trying to change the HVAC in my new F-150 truck, I've got to dive through some windows, and I'd much rather. It's like, please, please, please don't ever take away my volume knob. That'll be the one thing. I don't think I could buy a car that did not have a volume knob. That is just one thing that, you know, but I do like basic features of being able to pick what you want on the HVAC. And Ellen's Hyundai has that. It's got the buttons on there, but it's got dual temperature, but it's got some simple buttons that you can push and decide when you want it off and then where you want it in the fan speed. And I'm with you. I think that is a feature. The seats, I it's a pain in the ass if you don't have memory seats. If you're not if somebody else uses a vehicle beside you. Ellen loves her car, but she likes to take it instead of the truck when we go out of town or we go to Birmingham or somewhere. And she's got the top of the line Tucson, but at the time it didn't have memory seats. So by the time she has to fiddle for a long time to get it back exactly the way that she likes it. But you're right. If you're the only person driving it, yeah, manual seats are great. And by the way, it saves a lot of weight on your vehicle. It's just something less that's going to
Right.
break down the road. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really interesting. The downers on this car are number one, very plasticky interior. Just it's so cheap. Everything's so cheap. And then the biggest downer of all is the CVT, the continuously variable
Ugh, I
transmission.
hate that. Yeah.
Sucks.
We had that on a
Absolutely. Yeah.
we had a Ford, the Ford Taurus X, which is kind of like their crossover, and it had that continual variable transmission. I hated that transmission.
Can't stand it. I'll tell you a little funny story. And this is just kind of life. Usually when I go to the grocery store, I'll take my 911, and I have a late model, a 2021 992 in Oslo blue, a car you're very familiar with, Stefan.
Yes,
I'll take
love
that to
that
the
car.
grocery store. So, and I didn't realize this until this happened. So what I'll do is I'll get in the car and drive away. When I walk up, if someone sees me in it, they usually notice. And typically, if well, here's what actually happened. I'm walking up to my Crosstrek and I'm getting in, and there's a young woman driving by, in like a Nissan Rogue or something like that. And
Like,
um,
sir, is that your car?
well, here's what happened: is she didn't look and she didn't do anything. And I realized in that moment that I'm used to getting in a 911, and in that situation, she would look and she would probably give me a little smile going by.
Yeah.
And I realized I've gotten got used to that. People notice, and you get deferential treatment if you're getting into a nice car, but you get nothing.
You were invisible.
I was invisible.
Here's an invisible, late, very late middle-aged man with gray hair who's lost his game.
Well,
You drive a Subaru, you're screaming, I have no game.
well, you're screaming you're not successful. And it's funny because if they see anybody sees someone get into a 911 and they're older, they just figure you're successful. You just get a little, a look and usually a smile. But I'm sure she assumed I'm a retired PE teacher from the local high school.
You know, but, but where that vehicle would be perfect though is a third car if you have a place up in the mountains, that you fly to. Buy one
Yes.
of these things, park it there, no matter the weather, rain, snow, whatever happens, you're in the mountains. There's nothing really beats one of these with a set of snow tires. I mean, that is the ultimate perfect vehicle for that. And I could see having it for that, but as my daily driver in the city,
No,
no, no.
no, absolutely not. Actually, the good thing about having it at your cabin is that, the battery will run down in fancy cars because all these electronics drain the battery. There's nothing to drain the battery in this car. Everything's manual, it's all cheap and everything like that.
Yeah.
And of course, Stefan, it must be said after 3 years that that's not really true what you said. If you have a vehicle that's going to be Spartan in your cabin, it needs to be a Forerunner, not an Impreza.
Yeah. You're speaking of your battery running down when you park your vehicle, and my daughter Lauren had this trouble with her Ford. She's got a Ford Fusion, and one of the mechanics told her, he said, when you park your car, he said, take the headlights off of the automatic setting,
Oh, that's a great
and
idea.
it's basically solved her battery problem parking. And I would have never somehow that little automatic feature keeps apparently one of the computers kind of running or something. She said, no, just turn your headlights off automatic. And
Oh,
she hadn't had any
wow.
problems.
I don't drive my M3 very often, and frequently I gotta I gotta jump it to get it going. I'm gonna do that. That's a great
You got to
idea.
keep it on trickle charger, man. I bought a bunch off Amazon and everything's on a trickle charger now.
Well, if since you brought it up, I will say this. I live in a condo. We have an HOA and we have a parking garage, and we all have a spot, and you park in your spot. And they do not allow trickle chargers because the HOA says we're not going to pay for it.
Oh my God.
What?
Oh, what?
Right.
I mean, how much a trickle charger literally? It,
10
I
cents
can't,
a day, probably.
I bet it's not even that much. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Oh
Yep.
my gosh. We're
So
not
don't
going to
get me
pay for.
started at the damn trickle charger.
Oh, geez. Holy mackerel.
All right, let's talk about a car that does not need a trickle charger. Stefan, you've talked about the GTD Mustang, and we know it's coming now. You can order one, but it's going to be really affordable, right?
Oh yeah, it's totally affordable. I've got my deposit put down for one. Not really. Well, let me pull up a picture here. So yeah, the Mustang GTD. Share. There we go. This is kind of Ford's new Halo vehicle. GT previous vehicles, and what this really represents is that Jim Farley he has been into historic racing. The dude is a racer at heart.
CEO of Ford.
CEO, that's right. CEO of Ford, not Chris Farley's cousin, but Jim Farley really believes that Ford has a tremendous racing heritage. and he feels that that is worth capitalizing on. The tech that the trickle down technology makes it to the cars that we drive, that it bring, race on Sunday, sell on Monday, whatever the expression is. He believes that. So, and then he's always been tired of people talking about, the Porsches and Ferraris and this and that. And and he's had, General Motors had the Corvette. So he said, we're going to make a badass Mustang. And so the Mustang GTD is a result of that. The thing to understand really about this Mustang GTD, yeah, it looks like a Mustang on steroids, but it really is a barely street legal race car, is what this is. This car was designed to go out racing. It was designed to go out and challenge Porsche at the Nürburgring. So this car is going to be made by Multimatic in conjunction with Ford. Multimatic does the suspension. They're going to build the car up in Canada. Ford makes engine. It's got a 5.2 V8 in it. It's got a dry sump oil system, which for those, that's really a racing thing where if you have an oil pan at the bottom of your car, you go around a lot of corners fast. The oil with centrifugal force and gravity is going to go up the sides. You can get oil starvation. So dry sump oil system is a closed system. That is a racing feature. 108 15 horsepower, 664 of torque, and they got around the Nürburgring in 6 minutes and 57.6 seconds, which is the fastest U.S. production car ever around that circuit to ever do it. So that
It's
was
got to
a
be close
truly
to
a
the best Porsche number too. I mean,
yeah,
that's a great number.
it's
Anything
a
I remember when
great
under
number.
8 was incredible. You got
Yeah,
under 8 minutes. What was the time again? 6:50 something?
6 minutes 57.6 seconds, and Jim said
Under 7.
yeah, under 7. Jim Fry says they're going to get it's going to go faster. They're working on it. It's got this drag reduction system, go up to 202 miles an hour. It's got one of the coolest suspensions that I've ever seen, an inboard rear suspension that you can see. It's really cool. Of course, it's got the ceramic brakes and all that. And $327,000 is kind of where you start. But another
For a
cool
Mustang,
thing,
what was the price again?
$327,000. Okay.
Isn't it like mid-engine though? They moved the engine, not mid-engine, but they
It's
moved,
it's kind of a front mid-engine car. So the
yeah,
engine's
moved.
way back, yeah, for
But
weight
still,
balance.
$320,000 for a Mustang, Stefan.
Yeah, but this is really a street legal race car dressed up in a Mustang body, okay? It's kind of like comparing a regular 911 to, GT3 RS or GT2 RS. Those are really race cars with the 911 body on them. So we're, in this, and but you can pick, they'll let you pick whatever color you want for it. So kind of where are we at in this kind of money? This is kind of like Lamborghini Huracan money. This is Ferrari 296 GTB money. This is Aston Martin V12 money. This is AMG G Black Series money. Bentley Continental GT Speed money. A used Lexus LFA maybe. It's still cheaper than a Ford GT, which are in the 750 to 1 million. So they're really up there in the elite territory, but they proved it at the Nürburgring that yes, this is expensive as hell, but this is supercar territory pushing the boundaries, and they did set sub 7 minutes. I think it's fantastic because they didn't do the Corvette thing, put the engine in the middle on this one. This continues in my mind, this carries forward the spirit of the American muscle car front engine V8 car is going to live a lot longer because of this car. I think it's fantastic. And these things are crowd pleasers when they race at the Nürburgring. When Americans show up in these honking V8s, they may not win, but when they show up at Le Mans, people love them because there's so much emotional attachment to the American muscle car era and the Mustang. And to think this legacy continues on, I think it's super exciting for Ford. Hats off to Jim Farley. They'll sell every one of these, and he wants to get this back into Le Mans or some version of it. And I'm like, dude, go for it, go for it. I love it. I can't. I would love to see one in real life. May have to go
I'm
visit. I'm sure Jack Roush is going to have one, so I'll have to make another trip up to Livonia to visit Jack to see this car.
I'm thrilled by this car. I think for all those reasons, I absolutely love it. It's unabashedly American. It's a V8, which of course it has to be. The second generation Ford GT, which I think was also made by Multimatic in Canada,
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
had a V6, which is just not right. This is a Mustang. It looks like a Mustang. It has a V8. I love that they're going to race it. I love that they took it to the Nürburgring. It's just awesome. It's just loud, proud, and in your face. And I think it looks good too. I'm a little sad because just like the Ford GT, a lot of these are just going to be put away. They're not going to be driven.
Yeah.
Forget about taking it to the track. People aren't even going to drive them. They won't register. It'll have delivery miles only, which I think is a shame. But I love that they are making this car, Stefan.
I'm trying to pull this up real quick because I want to get the number right here. I just listened to Chris Harris's podcast, and Ford took a whole bunch of Mustangs there and let these guys have like a Mustang spec race, and they had a blast with them. So I think it's wonderful. I think Chris Farley, I mean Jim Farley is going to go down and yeah, I think Jim Farley is going to go down in history as one of the all-time great Ford CEOs. I mean, he is doing everything he can. He has a skunk works going on right now at Ford to catch up with the Chinese to make sure their EV technology that we stay with them because he knows we're behind. And then the Mustang Mach-E, which I don't like the name, but that is a fantastic EV. They did it right out of the box with that. And so I think all around Jim Farley is doing a tremendous job. I love the guy. I really wish they would bring back another sedan or another hot hatch again. I think they're missing an opportunity there with enthusiasts to bring people back into the Ford fold. I'm a huge Ford fan. Absolutely, I love my F-150. I love my Bullet Mustang, and I'm excited for Ford. This is not the McNamara era of Ford stagnation. Yeah, this is Ford. This is fantastic time.
I think they're doing great things. I think that even though you just take a standard Mustang GT, that's a great car. You can get it with a manual transmission. It's loud. I love those. I think that Chrysler was stupid to discontinue the Challenger and the Charger, two
Yes.
Dodges with V8s that were awesome. And how much enthusiasm of Dodge was driven by those two models? Probably 100%. Ram, of course, is not a Dodge, but it used to be called. So maybe you can say, all right, Ram trucks generate some enthusiasm, which they do. But come on, if it's just Dodge by itself, no one's excited by the Dodge Journey, which is the other vehicle. And literally negative people, negative 100, whatever it's less than 0% of people. I'm going to go into negative people. That's how bad it is, are excited by the Dodge Hornet, which is one of the worst cars that they sell today. It's embarrassing how bad that car is. Ford is doing the opposite. They're coming up with cars that people can get excited about. I agree. If they had like a Ford Focus hatch that was fun, they should bring that back. I guess they won't, but that would make people excited too. And also, you get young people in the door. Young people get
Right.
excited about Ford at a young age, and they keep that enthusiasm like you have.
I mean, they nailed it with the Bronco. The Bronco, the Mustang Mach-E, continuing the Mustang, and then the F-150. Now they've got the Maverick, they've got the Ranger, and when you go abroad, it is unbelievable number of Ford Rangers over there, and they've got their own versions of Raptors. They've got all their version Rangers. Jim Farley is making exciting product that, people may not get the Raptor, they can't afford it, but they're going to get the Ranger. They're going to get a Ranger because they like what associated with it. And yeah, I just think I really believe Jim Farley is going to. And let me, Jim Farley has a podcast. So for you listeners, take a listen to Jim Farley's podcast. He's a very good interviewer, has some fantastic people on there. And I really enjoy listen. I like his podcasts. They're all typically short, 20, 30 minutes. And I don't know how the guy's the CEO of Ford. He races, he runs Ford, and he has a podcast. So I don't know. The guy's fantastic. I love him.
Beautiful. All right. On that note, close us out.
All right. So everybody, thanks for listening. Remember to hit like, subscribe. If you do that, you'll get automatically notified when we come out with a podcast. And we've been pretty good here. We're coming down to every 2 weeks now, which is good. Hopefully we'll get Adams Hudson back in the fold here. And we'll see you probably in 2 weeks. All right, Dave, take care, man.